Currently, I see a lot of complaints and posts from within the community about the difficulty of Mythic Plus and it being too hard and not casual friendly. People are not able to get the gear upgrades at a fast enough pace, or at least at the pace they were used to, and I'm not sure whether I fully agree with this sentiment, and in this video I'm going to share my thoughts on this matter. Hey everyone, I'm Grim. I've been playing the game for over 17 years now, and without much downtime, have pretty much experienced every season in the game, every dungeon and almost every raid to some extent. Never too hardcore, I like to think that I represent a large portion of the World of Warcraft community in terms of commitment and experience. I have also recently started making content and guides for everyone trying to tank on Vengeance Demon Hunter or tanking Mythic Plus dungeons in general. For this one, I thought I'd try something different, something new. If you like this kind of content, please give the video a like and ideally subscribe to my channel so I know I'm not talking into a void. Now, before I get into my thoughts on this topic, I'd like to take you back a couple of seasons where the community was quite vocal about how Mythic Plus works and how affixes influence the way we compete in this dungeon running scheme of getting gear and gaining score. Most of the feedback I've been hearing at those times is that players wanted to have less emphasis on affixes and more towards the mechanics within the dungeon itself. Affixes should be fun and should focus on rewarding when done correctly, in contrast to being punished if not. Something I'm not certain whether they knew what they were asking for, seeing how this season has started. Also, there was the issue of getting into dungeons and getting a large pool of players on each individual Keystone level in hopes of forming a group more quickly. Basically, squishing all the players together by lowering the difficulty cap paired to in-game rewards from Keystone level 20 to level 10. Simultaneously, squishing the difficulty levels and increasing the difficulty for every individual step up that ladder. And to make it even more casual friendly, removing the need of doing a certain dungeon for both fortified and tyrannical weeks to receive a full-fledged score on that dungeon. Altogether, these changes have been great in my opinion and indicate that Blizzard is stepping up in terms of listening to our community and catering to our wishes. I think the affixes are decent, the dungeons are diverse and the new ones are, even if not always to my preference, show some kind of creativity that align with the overall theme of the expansion. Except for the Challenger's Peril though. The death penalty is just straight up annoying. And for some reason, seeing the feedback Blizzard has received, I just can't believe it will remain as it is now. And next to that, yes, I know, there have been issues. Affixes that spawn at times, making a boss fight next to impossible, and abilities that have been tuned in such a way that doing them in an uncoordinated group make them way too tedious or difficult to be able to call them fun. These are things though that in my opinion should be easily addressed, if they have not already been addressed, looking at the frequent updates and tweaks. That including the change to receive the best crests on Keystone level 8 compared to 9 which it was at the start of the season. Circling back to the perceived difficulty in Mythic Plus dungeons, we first need to define what we mean by difficulty. Are the mechanics too hard to execute? Are we dying because there are too many things to manage at once? Or is it more about the sequence of events that make it more challenging? Where even if we use our cooldowns at the right moment, we still die because of something we missed earlier. These, in my opinion, are the factors that contribute to what makes content truly difficult. Too much to plan ahead, too many things happening simultaneously, or situations where you need to think several steps ahead to handle mechanics properly. This is what I define as difficult content. And I know, of course, that difficult can mean different things to different people. But honestly, with a few exceptions, I don't feel like the current content is too overwhelming. Once you learn the mechanics, you can anticipate almost everything these dungeons throw at you. The only surprises tend to come from the group's mistakes and not from the dungeon itself, since pretty much everything is timed and will come at the same occurrence. That said, I do believe we now have to learn more mechanics than ever before. The shift in focus from affixes to dungeon-specific mechanics has increased the complexity. We're punished for not dealing with these mechanics correctly, which means there's more to study and practice. That's why I think the community may not have fully considered the consequences of asking for more meaningful dungeon mechanics. Now, with 8 dungeons full of mechanics, even from smaller trash mobs, we have a lot more to master. As an example, think about Grimbaton, a dungeon that pack-wise has 3 to 4 wings with each different mobs with different mechanics that are, especially for a tank beginning this season, very punishing. The community just needs a little bit more time to learn. And this, coupled with the difficulty squish, has slowed down the feeling of progress, which also ties into the reward system. Speaking of rewards, I think we've grown accustomed to getting gear way too easily. In previous seasons it was possible to, within a few weeks, have gear on par with top Mythic Plus players, just by playing a lot. And while that feels good, it's also diminished the sense of accomplishment. I remember the early days of WoW, standing in Stormwind, Orgrimmar or Dalaran, seeing players in full heroic gear and knowing they had worked hard to earn it. It felt special, like Mythic raiding has been since its introduction. I guess the main takeaway here is that we need to pace ourselves and enjoy the journey, rather than rush to get everything at once. It's fine to learn the dungeons at a lower keystone, but once you get into level 7 and up, there's a general expectation that you'll come prepared and knowing. On these levels, chances are you encounter players that might have put in more time and effort than you have, had their fair share of frustrations, and can only hope people know what they need to do in terms of their responsibilities. Making it even more frustrating if that's the case, and maybe even lashing out, as sadly you often see in this season. Or any season for that matter. Before I wrap this video up, I'd like to share some tips to improve your experience both in-game and with other players. First, try forming your own groups for your key. You can label it with something like weekly run if you don't really mind whether it is timed. Obviously, everyone wants to time a key, so this will make it that everyone still tries, but tend to be more relaxed and stay if not. Be upfront about your goals, whether you're aiming to time the key or just complete it regardless. Setting clear expectations early can prevent frustration later on, and may even help you find reliable players to run more dungeons with. Endgame WoW is all about teamwork, and while tools like Group Finder make it easier to jump into content, the social aspect is still just as important. Don't forget that good communication and a positive attitude can go a long way in making your dungeon run smoother and more enjoyable. Another thing to consider is how easy it is to level up and gear up an alt these days. If you're feeling frustrated by the difficulty, it might be a good idea to take a step back and switch things up with an alt. Ideally, try playing a role that's different from your main. If you're a tank, try switching to DPS or healing to gain a new perspective. This will help you see how group-wide damage spikes feel in real time, or understand how tank positioning can affect overall group damage. If you usually play DPS, try out healing. You'll quickly see how challenging it is when players don't use their defensives at critical moments, or why the tank pulls in a specific order or position the mobs in a certain way. Gaining this kind of insight not only helps you improve your own gameplay, but also makes you more patient and understanding with your fellow players. On top of that, it adds another layer of progress by gearing up another character with a different playstyle. Heck, you might learn that in a previous wipe, there might have been something you missed or could have done to avoid it. At the end of the day, we're all here to enjoy the game. Sometimes that means taking a step back, slowing down and appreciating the challenge rather than getting frustrated by it. Try different playstyles, go off meta and see where you end up. Or team up with some friends or guildmates to create fun, wacky compositions and experiment with unconventional strategies. As for the meta, sure, it's fun to play a spec with the highest potential for damage, healing or tanking. But there's something incredibly satisfying about outperforming a meta player who just follows the numbers without really mastering the gameplay. And if there's one thing we can count on, it's that Blizzard will keep tweaking specs based on community feedback. A spec that's underperforming right now could very well be S tier next season or maybe even later in the current season. The experience you gain now will give you a strong start when that time comes. So just have fun and focus on perfecting your own playstyle without getting too distracted by what others are doing or saying. Anyway, I hope my rambling was at least a little bit interesting to some of you. And if you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to let me know. And if you have any tips, comments or suggestions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. Thanks for now, and I'll see you in the next video.